Can you tell the jury, are you a post-certified law enforcement officer?
Yes, ma'am.
What exactly does that mean?
It means I have been through basic mandate and I am post-certified through the state of Georgia. I got certified in 2007.
2007.
Yes.
Where were you between 2007 and 2011?
I worked for the University of Georgia Police Department where I achieved the rank of corporal and I was employed there for around 2.5 years.
Can you also tell the jury about your educational background?
Yes, ma'am. I have bachelor's degrees in psychology, criminal justice, and early childhood education.
All right.
Certainly.
Yeah, if you could scoot up a little bit closer too. All right, Sergeant. Were you employed with the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office on July 5th, 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
And in what capacity?
I was assigned to basically dazed persons, which was our major crimes unit.
What was your title at that time?
Detective.
What's the difference between detective, investigator, sergeant, all of those titles?
Investigators are our deputy level investigators, and our detectives are specifically corporal level investigators, and you have sergeants who are the unit supervisors.
So you were a detective in 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sergeant now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just want to make sure I have your titles accurate. Were you called out to 2155 Purcell Lane on July 5th, 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Around what time?
It was around, we arrived on scene at around 1:30, and I believe we left just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
I'm sorry, you left when?
Just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and got there about 1:30.
I see what you're saying. Okay. When you arrived on scene, what was the first thing you did?
When we arrived on scene, we initially got directed towards the back of the residence. On the way there, we met with Lieutenant Simmons and were briefed on some of the basic information that was known at the time.
So what was the information that you had that you were briefed on prior to walking into the scene?
Essentially, we knew that one of the individuals that lived at the house, his name was Gary, he was missing. Nobody had seen him in a few days. We knew that what were believed to be human remains were found on the fire that was in the back. We also knew that some people had already started talking about some concerning things when they were away from other members of the family, such as seeing blood in the basement near the stairs, and also there being a gun that was seen a few days before and now wasn't seen anymore. So that was some of the initial basic information we had been given.
So when you were briefed by Lieutenant Simmons, what did you do next?
I went and looked at basically the burn pile in the backyard where the human remains were believed to be at.
Did you contact anyone, anybody of your supervisors?
Certainly. After looking at the burn pile, I contacted Sergeant Hands, who was my supervisor at the time.
Okay, and was crime scene called out?
Yes, ma'am.
When you looked at the pile, the burn pile, and then called Sergeant Hands, how was this investigation being handled? What was it being handled as?
We look at all death investigations as potential homicides when we first get on scene and we first start learning the information. Sometimes I can steer an investigation very quickly towards it. Basically, we get evidence and we get information, we start talking to the family, and it can steer investigations towards believing that the crimes are of a natural death or an accidental death. And in this particular case, we didn't have much information, so we were treating it like a homicide, but at the same time, we were just following our standard protocols as we would with any death investigation.
Did someone eventually get a search warrant for the residence?
Yes, ma'am.
Why would law enforcement want a search warrant for the residence at that point?
So that we have the legal grounds to search the residence and the curtilage and the property.
Once that was obtained, what were you tasked with doing on the scene?
The first thing I was actually tasked with doing was speaking with Scott Farris.
Speaking with who?
Scott.
Okay. How long did you speak with him for?
About an hour and a half.
And did you learn some information from him that allowed you to move forward and speak with someone else?
Yes, ma'am.
Who did you speak with after that?
Chris Farris.
And did Chris Farris share helpful information to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Was Scott Farris the one who had mentioned the concerning things that you had previously testified to?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Chris Farris share some concerning things?
He also did, yes, ma'am.
Were you present when the fire detective, Shane Daniels, was there?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And were you present when he checked Scott Farris and Melody Farris' hands?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe that process to the jury?
Certainly. He had several buckets and he had some swabs. I didn't get a good look at what specific types of swabs they were, but I did take photographs of him going through this process because it's not a process I was very familiar with myself because I'm not a fire investigator. So we went ahead and tried to document that via photographs, and I had also talked to Scott previously and got his consent to do this as well.
You were equipped with a camera?
Yes.
And you took photos throughout the night?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. After standing with Shane Daniel when he checked Scott and Melody's hands, what was the next thing that you were tasked with?
The next thing I ended up doing was standing by with the tractor, waiting on a member of the crime scene unit to come and process it.
Why did you do that?
Because it was a significant distance away from the house. We wanted to make sure it was secured.
Why did you need to make sure it was secured?
So that nobody could go over it. Once we realized the value of it and that we needed to process it, we wanted to make sure that there was no potential that anything could have happened to it in the meantime.
So individuals that you interviewed had mentioned something about the tractor?
Yes, ma'am.
That interested you all?
Yes, ma'am.
In your investigation? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. So you stood by to make sure nothing happened to it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, after standing by the tractor, what did you do next?
After the tractor was processed, I ended up back in the residence, and at one juncture, I asked the crime scene unit if I could assist with searching the basement area of the home. And when I did that, I did get permission to assist them, and when I did that, I found a projectile on the floor in the basement.
Sergeant, is this the projectile that you found? And I'm showing you Thrasher 280.
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the location in which you found it?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you touch it?
No, ma'am.
Did you move it?
No, ma'am.
Did you feel your foot kick it?
No, I didn't.
Just a closer view. Is that exactly how you found it?
Yes, it is.
What did you do once you found it?
As soon as I found it, Lieutenant Ballard and Melanie Thrasher just so happened to be about 5 feet away from me, just on the other side of the chair next to the bar, and I immediately drew their attention to it so that they could collect it pursuant to their policies and procedures to maintain its forensic integrity.
Once you found that, did you kind of search the rest of the area close by to see if there were any other projectiles or any holes or anything like that?
As soon as I had found it, since they were right there and I got their attention, I let them handle more of that part of it. Because since I had found evidence, I didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize any other evidence in the location.
After you found the projectile, did you search any other rooms in the house?
Over the course of the evening, I had searched some other rooms in the house. I was following behind several other investigators. I wanted to search more, but just due to the nature of the investigation, as soon as I would start to begin to search a room, within moments I'd be called away and asked a question or need to brief somebody on information I had. So I really didn't get the opportunity to search the house like I wanted to. But I did go back behind other investigators to research areas to see if we had missed anything. And I never found anything of note doing that.
How long were you on scene that night?
We were on scene until a decent bit after midnight.
After your task of being inside the home and doing that portion of the investigation, did your role move to interviewing witnesses at some point?
It did. Later it was a little after midnight, I ended up calling Chris again and speaking with him over the phone.
I want to move to the early morning of the 6th, so still the evening of the 5th. Did you speak with Scott and Melody?
That would have been on the 6th, yes.
The early morning of the 6th, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you assisted Detective Hayes in those interviews?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
How many
Well-
hours did that take?
Can I clarify one thing? I
course.
actually spoke with Scott by myself out in the parking lot, and then I went in and assisted Detective Hayes with interviewing Melody Farris in the conference room at the precinct.
Okay. And how long did that take?
I believe I spoke with Scott for about 15 minutes roughly, and then I ended up speaking with Melody for almost 4 hours.
And at some point during the 6th, did the crime scene open back up at the house?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you assist in securing that property once it was opened back up to the family?
Yes, ma'am. I did go back to the house prior to going to the precinct.
I want to go back to the house. You mentioned that you had taken some photos. Did you have the opportunity to take some photos in the kitchen of the kitchen counter, items that were on the kitchen counter?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Sergeant, I'm showing you what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit Kuykendall 1,
2, 3, and 4. Go ahead and look at those for me. Do you recognize the items in those photos?
Yes, ma'am.
Are they fair and accurate depictions of the items that you saw in the home on the 5th?
Yes, they are.
State moves to tender into evidence states Kuykendall 1 through, what was the last number I gave you?
I believe it's 4.
4.
All right. Objection? No objection. You're good.
All right, Sergeant, I want to go over those. Okay, what are we looking at in Kuykendall 1?
This is a picture of a debit card issued to Gary Farris, and on the right side you can see another financial transaction card which is also issued to Gary Farris. And in the bottom portion of the picture you can see the wallet of Melody Farris, which is where these cards came from.
Those are the cards pulled from this wallet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to move to Kuykendall 2. And is this just a better photo of what was the contents of the wallet?
Yes.
Okay. And 3, Kuykendall 3, what are we looking at here?
That is an American City Bank card issued to a Roy Barton.
And at the time, did anyone know who Roy Barton was?
No, ma'am.
And the last one, is this the back of that same card?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that's